All right, I just want to talk about honest art today. And what I mean by that is making the art that only you can make, the art that you have to make. And I regret shutting down my computer. This is my first ever video like this, so bear with me. Okay, we're back. So, there's this great podcast that I highly recommend called You Are a Storyteller. And something that they have talked about on it is the idea of survival information in stories. More specifically, they think the thing that all great stories have, whether it's a folk tale, movie, TV show, is that it contains survival information. And what they mean by that is that it contains wisdom or information of some kind that teaches you how to live your life in a better way, and it helps you in your own life. So we remember stories like the Three Little Pigs, and the Tortoise and the Hare because they have very recognizable and memorable, easy to understand survival information. Um, so why I'm bringing that up is because we as artists need to ask ourselves, what have we lived through? What have we survived? What wisdom have we gained from these experiences? And how can we put that into our art to teach other people, help other people? Because that's the art that really stands the test of time. Another thing I want to talk about is I think a lot of people, and especially us artists, we have this assumption, we have this subconscious feeling at times that you have to be really good at something in order to share it. Or actually, even for me, we feel like I feel like I had to be really good at something before I even made it or did it. Um, so for me, I wanted to make comics about 3 years ago, and I'm like, okay, well, so I tried making comics, but then there was a lot of friction in the drawing because I felt like I wasn't good enough at drawing yet. So then I was like, okay, I'm gonna practice drawing and get better with that. So then eventually I can make comics. Um, but I think most of the time when we do that, it's it's a really I don't want to say dangerous, but it's for me it's the number one thing that prevents me from actually making art. And um when you start making things, then you learn from them. Like that's one of the best ways to learn. I'm not the first person that's said this, but it's such an important thing. And that's literally why I'm making this video right now. This is the first video like this I've ever made, and it's because I'm just sharing some ideas that I literally had yesterday. And instead of thinking like, okay, well, they're not fully formed, or I'm not an expert on this topic or something, that I'm not allowed to share them, or I have to wait until I learn more or it's all fully formed. I know I'm never going to share it if I do that. So that's why I'm doing this, just an impromptu video where I'm just getting some thoughts out of my head that I think are important. And I'm thinking if they're important to me, then chances are they'll be important for somebody else out there. Um, and Something else I was realizing is I'm learning these things anyway in my life. I'm coming to these realizations and writing my thoughts down, taking notes. So why not just take a couple minutes and record myself to share it with you guys? Like I was saying, I think a lot of people feel like you have to master something before you can share it or teach it or like give advice on it even. Okay, next thing is I think a lot of people think that you have to master a craft in order to make good work in that craft, which I do not think is true at all. And I have a few examples of this. Um, so, one example that I have of this is illustration. I believe you don't have to be good at drawing to make a compelling illustration. And that might sound weird, but what I mean is if 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 your work is honest, if it's telling a compelling story, um like that's why I want the whole theme of this video to be honesty over polish. It's not about how technically good something looks or something sounds. It's about, is it authentic? Um Honestly, like I'm trying to think of more things, but that is the number one thing that I care about with art. Um and not just art. I actually, now that I'm thinking about it, everything else in life, authenticity and honesty is one of the most important things to me. But going back to the different examples, you don't have to master something or even get that good at something to make good work or art in that area. You don't have to master the guitar to make a great song. You don't have to be a great singer even to make a great song. I believe if you're telling an honest story and you're being vulnerable, I personally care a lot more about the emotion and the honesty in art. And if I can feel that, then that's the special stuff. I don't care how cool something looks or how nice something sounds. Like sure, there's always going to be things where like that flashy stuff does catch your attention, but it doesn't stand the test of time at all. One good example, one good example of that is I'll hear a song for the first time and it just sounds awesome. Like it's produced so well. But then after the second time that I hear it, I just don't really want to listen to it anymore because it's really shallow. Maybe it's repetitive or there's just no heart in it and it just doesn't resonate with me. It's just like, it catches my ear because it sounds shiny and it's polished. And similarly to that, there's music that I've heard for the first time that I didn't love because it didn't necessarily have all this polish on it, but it had something special in it that got me coming back to it. And then I kept coming back and I kept coming back. And for me, two albums that come to mind is 22 A Million by Bon Iver and Currents by Tame Impala. Not saying that those albums don't have polish, because there's definitely polish to be found in them, but those albums had such substance for me, especially when I dove into the lyrics and I just kept listening to them and they just kept growing on me. So maybe there's something you can think of that you didn't love at first, but it really grew on you and it became your favorite thing, like your absolute favorite thing. And maybe ask yourself, why is that your favorite thing? What kept you coming back to it? And what's making you think about it right now that it popped into your head? That's another thing that is a great thing to do as an artist, is figure out what are your favorite things and why are they your favorite things. Shout out to Andy J Pizza with the Creative Pep Talk podcast, because I know he's talked about this before. I will link that in the description or put something on the screen. That's an amazing podcast, which he's given me so many great ideas, a lot of which I'll probably be talking about on this channel. Let's see what else. Right. So I'm pretty sure I was talking about comics earlier. Talking about how you don't have to be technically good at something to make good work, and comics is a great example of that. And more specifically, I mean Instagram comics or web comics. So, when I was wanting to make comics, I was coming from an animation background. So I went to college for 2D animation, and I was focusing on things like anatomy and just solid drawing skills. So I was always in the mindset of like, okay, I have to keep practicing and get better at drawing technically, and there wasn't as much emphasis on storytelling or honesty. You know, we didn't have any classes about honesty or anything like that. So, where am I going with this? Um, right. So when I started making comics, um, I was spending so much time making sure all the lines were exactly how I wanted them, and that like all the proportions of the limbs were correct, and all of that was taking me away from the stories that I wanted to tell. And it would take me like a month to make a 4 panel comic, which like ideally, um like okay, here's something that I've been learning lately. When I learn something and I'm like very passionate about it, it's only for a short amount of time, and it's in that time that I want to be able to make art for it. So what I used to do is I would write down a certain thought or a piece of inspiration, thinking that I'll come back to it later. But then when I would have time to come back to it, I wouldn't be nearly as inspired, and then it was just kind of gone. And then there's so many things that I didn't make because I felt like it would have to be perfect, or I would have to wait until I had time or something. But now I've just been trying to make things when I'm passionate about them, um, which is kind of related to the whole honesty over polish thing. Um, Sorry, my computer just turned on. It distracted me. Um, so, like I said earlier, that's why I'm making this video, because I'm passionate about this thing right now, and I wanted to share it. And I don't care if it's like still forming. Um, I also think that's part of the appeal with these things is like, um, my thoughts are still forming as I'm saying them, and like this is like you're witnessing my it's like you're witnessing my realization of certain things, which I think is cool. Um, right. So about the comics, I was realizing that there's all these comics that were really popular on Instagram that have hundreds of thousands of followers or sometimes even millions, but they didn't have good drawings. They were really cartoony or simple or even just poorly drawn, which leads me to something funny that I realized when I was thinking about this. There's literally a comic page on Instagram called Poorly Drawn Lines. It's hilarious. I love the comic so much. Um, it's it's not drawn that bad, but they're very simple drawings. So it proves the point that you don't have to do these technically impressive drawings to make good comics. And I mean, sure, in like uh, Marvel and DC comics, it would be weird if the drawings were so rudimentary or bad. That would probably take away from the comics as a whole. But as far as comedy goes, and also, um, I don't know what word to use to describe it, but I think authenticity and um, healing art. The technicality I don't think matters most of the time. And one great example of this is Nana Writes. She makes this really beautiful art. Sometimes it's sequential, sometimes it's an illustration. I think she also does poems, but she makes art that is so vulnerable and honest and authentic and healing and all of these wonderful things. But if you actually look at her drawings, they're just kind of scribbles. Um, Definitely not like technical by any means, but she's got a decent following on Instagram, and I love her art so much, and I'm so thankful for it. And I'm sure I speak for so many other people when I say that I really don't care what her drawings look like, because what I care about are the messages that she's saying and like what I'm learning from her. And um, her art has comforted me many times. Also, a shout out to Sister Cody, because he also falls into this category where he just makes really beautiful vulnerable art. Um, but the drawings, like, they look like kids drew them, which might turn some people off, but for those people, they're probably not the target audience anyway. So, but yeah, those are the ideas for today. Um, I enjoyed doing this, and I plan on doing more, hopefully. Yeah, if you like this one, I guess check out my channel for more stuff. And also, I post art on Instagram. One of my accounts is called Drew Gray Art. I'll put it on the screen or in the description. And then my other page is called Jumbo Wholesome, and that's where I make that's where I make like my honest, authentic art, where I try to help people and whatnot. Um, and that's also like my brand and business. So I also have some merch for Jumbo Wholesome, including this. This is my thinking cap. Um, yeah, so you can check out that page if you're interested in that kind of stuff. But if you actually made it this far watching my very first video, then thank you. You're awesome. And I hope to see you in the next one. All right. Peace.